Welcome to the Crown Council's Young Dentist Program Mentorship Library. I'm Stuart Anderson. This episode, How to Hire the Best, Secrets and Strategies, presented by Barbara Freet, part of the Human Resource Advisor team. Lasts about 35 minutes as we go over and talk about great things that you can be doing to hire the right people, questions that you should be asking, things that young doctors and businesses should be doing to create the most essential part of their practice, which is the team, the most valuable part. Barbara used to own a recruiting and staffing company before creating Human Resource Advisors and has years of experience in hiring, what questions to ask, and what things to look for when building a team. I hope you enjoyed the program, and with no further ado, Barbara Freet. I am joined today with Barbara Freet, who's going to share with you and kind of guide you through a presentation that she has done and has handcrafted for our young dentists in a way that will hopefully provide some mentorship and some solutions to you as young dentists. I'm going to turn the time over to Barbara, as she's the pro and knows exactly what she's doing, and I know very little about, really anything, Barbara. So you're the pro, you're the expert. If you want to introduce yourself and then get started, I would appreciate it. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Stu. I'm Barbara Freet, and I own a human resources consulting company. We are in California, the land of the laws, and we have about 700 dental clients nationwide in all the areas of dentistry. So we have been immersed with our dental clients since about 1996. So we've probably heard most stories. If I say all of them, of course, tomorrow, that will make me a liar. There'll be a new one. But yes, we really enjoy our dental clients a lot.
And Barbara, you've been a Crown Council resource partner for at least 10 years inside the group. Yeah, I mean, you work with
over 10.
Yeah, hundreds of the Crown Council offices. We're together every year at the annual event. And when we started creating the Young Dentist Mentor Library, you were top of my list. You're always willing to share, and
thank you.
I'm grateful you joined us. So
thank you. Well, today we're going to talk about hiring, because young dentists may often start as an associate in a practice, but eventually they may want to buy their own practice. So the first thing I want to say is, if you're tempted to buy a practice and keep everything exactly the way it was, I would caution you strongly not to do that. You really need to have the exiting dentist terminate all his employees, and you need to hire the ones you want to hire. This is your golden opportunity to not continue with a person who's been a problem in a practice. If you don't do that, you are liable potentially for any of the mistakes that the exiting dentist made in his practice. So I just want to add that, since I recently went through an issue in California with one of my clients who thought he was doing everyone a favor, and he was sued for 3 years of back unpaid overtime. So that's why I want to caution you about buying a practice and keeping everybody as is.
Wow.
Today we're going to talk about how to hire the best, secrets and strategies. And I want to talk about one particular part, and that is the key to hiring effectively. Even though you're a wonderful dentist, you do excellent clinical work, the reason that you will be successful is because of the team that you choose. They can both make you indispensable to your community, or they can send everybody down the street to the other dentist. So the key to hiring effectively is key. There you have it. How your questions, we're going to talk about how your questions can get you what you need to know during the interview. And we're going to talk about why references are a critical part of the process. Lots of people think that you can't get references. People won't tell you anything. That is not true. I'm going to teach you how to use objective measurements that can add credibility to your process. If you have a process, a hiring process, not only will it help you, but it will show that you are hiring people not subjectively, but with objective means. So you can choose the best future team member rather than the best candidate. It's still about the people. Let me say that one more time. choose the best future team member rather than the best candidate. They may be two different things. So let's talk about the key to everything. The answer to the following question is at the root of effective hiring, performance, discipline, and termination decisions. Are you ready? Here it comes. What makes a person successful in this position? That's a very different question than what is their experience, what computer systems do they know, how long have they been in dentistry. What makes a person successful in the position encompasses their skills, their education, their experience, their personality, their work time requirements, and how they present themselves. And lastly, pace. Did you ever think about pace?
No.
Pace is really important in my company because people who are slow-paced and methodical don't work for me. I drive them crazy and they drive me crazy. So pace is one of those things that people don't often think about, but it's really critical. And of course, there's more. So let's take a look at this key. What makes a person successful in this position? So pick a position. Use the title, not the name of the person in that position. And then make as complete a list of what makes a person successful in this position as you can. These are things that you will use over and over. Your list creates your posting, which should be different than your job description. Why not just post your job description? You may not have one yet. Call me, I can help. But your posting has a different purpose than your job description. Your job description is a list of the essential functions of the job, the physical requirements of the job, the qualifications, skills, abilities, etc. Your posting is a marketing piece. And I'm sure Lane and others that do marketing in Crown Council would second that thought. Your interview questions. Once you've made your list, you're going to make interview questions to get the answers during the interview that you want. There are a lot of very interesting interview questions out there, like, are you a bear? Are you a dove? Well, that's all great, but if you don't know you need a bear for this position, it's just interesting questions. These should be in writing, and they only need to be developed once per position. These are also going to form your reference checking questions. How will you find out if this person is a fit? By asking the right questions, and yes, you can get information from previous employers. You just have to ask. It's going to be part of the job description. If you have work time requirements, you can put those in the essential functions. And also, I think I just said that. Your essential functions can include additional pertinent data such as working weekends or attending functions after hours. It also creates the salary level based on job value and internal equity. If your eyes are rolling at this point, let me just say that people are very conscious of where their salary falls in relation to others. And yes, employees can talk about their salaries in the workplace, according to the National Labor Relations Board. So you want to make sure that you don't pay somebody new more than somebody who's already worked for you for a while just because that's the salary they want. You have job values and you have to have internal equity so that people in the company that provide a certain level of value are paid commensurately. So before you interview, you should know the salary range. What can you afford? Don't let somebody talk you into something that you can't really afford. Your list also creates the performance appraisal form. If these are the things that make a person successful in the position, these are the things you want to measure. And your expectations are clear, consistent, and documented now because you started with this list. It also creates all your disciplinary documentation. If you have this list of what makes a person successful and the person isn't doing those things, you're consistent. You can go back to them and say, here's the list. Here are the things we talked about originally. You're not doing X, Y, and Z. You have proof of your expectations, and any deviations are clear. It also helps with consistency in your termination process. You're able to point to a clear list of consistent expectations and multiple ways you've communicated about them. And exiting people may disagree, but at least they will understand why they are being terminated because you have communicated. Communicating your expectations is one of your chief requirements as a boss. Don't think people are going to read your mind. They're not. So you have to have something to communicate your expectations. So let's take a minute to talk about writing the interview questions. So you have your list. Now, how are you going to find out if these people that you're interviewing actually do and think and are the way you want them to be? So you're going to develop questions that will get you the information you need in order to choose the best candidates. But how? Look at your list of those things that will make someone successful in the position. Develop questions that will elicit the best answers. That's not so easy. Your question should be clean. In other words, you don't want to put something into the question that leads the person to the answer that you want. I'll give you some examples in a minute. Questions should be open-ended, not questions answered with a yes or no. Are you friendly? Yes. You don't know anything more than you did a minute ago. So how are you going to find out if friendliness is something that you want in your front desk person? How are you going to get the answer for that? How are you going to ask the question more to the point? If you don't know the answer, it isn't a good question. You have answers to all your questions. And your question should have good tone. You want this person to be drawn to you and your practice. So your questions themselves should have good tone. Then we're gonna come back to questions. In fact, maybe this is a good time to see if I can get, well, maybe we're done, so I don't ruin the slideshow, Stuart. I'll try to pull up some of the questions that I use as an example, but we'll stick with this for the moment.
Okay, good.
So now we're going to plan the interview. Use a legal, up-to-date employment application. Why? Because it gives you information you won't get on the resume. Also, the last page is the first communication you have with the candidate about your legal obligation and theirs. So, for example, the last page in the application should say that they should follow your dispute resolution procedure, and that if they lie on the application, it's not worded quite that way, that you can terminate them in the future. This has come in very handy on more than one occasion when somebody says they have a license, they have a certain education, and it's not true. If they lie, you can terminate them because of this statement in the application. Use your interview questions so you can ask every candidate the same questions. You'll get very good at interviewing if you do this. And it helps you compare apples to apples. And you can create benchmarks if you like to do those kinds of things. It helps you ask only job-related questions. And the only questions that are effective are the ones you know the answers to. And as you start asking, you'll find that you get certain answers, and when you hire those people, you'll know intuitively the answers that really are the important ones when it comes to finding the best person. And again, know the salary range and the benefits you're going to offer. Don't get into a negotiation without being prepared ahead of time.
Nice.
So are you ready? The candidate will form an opinion about the whole organization based on how you come across to them in the first 5 minutes. It isn't about your intentions, it's about their perceptions. If you're rushed, gather your wits before you meet him or her. Your appearing rush will tell them that you aren't listening and you aren't going to engage with them fully. They will likely respond in kind. Smile, look the person in the eye, and greet him or her by name. Engage in small talk, but do it with real interest. So now, by the time you're seated across from each other, you should appear comfortable, open, and positive in your demeanor. Tell the candidate you're glad he or she is interested in the position and you're looking forward to getting to know him or her. Smile. People forget to smile. Have the person's resume in front of you that you have carefully read beforehand and your interview questions on a separate sheet. Resist the temptation to start talking about the practice and the position. Save it for later. Start by asking general questions. For example, are you currently working? Just because their resume says to present doesn't mean they are working, by the way. If the person is working, ask why they want to leave. If she isn't working, ask why she left all of her previous positions, one at a time, going backwards. This question gives you a great opportunity to hear about their values. Listen for a better opportunity, said more than once. They will leave you for a better opportunity too.
Good.
Listen for long stories about their jobs, management issues, financial woes, etc. You want someone to give you the short to medium story, but you want the answer, not all the detail. However, don't cut them off. Just listen and note your question sheet with something neutral like very detailed. These are some of the secrets of being a recruiter for 30 years. Then move into your questions and write down the answers in brief. Don't be afraid to ask clarifying questions and additional legal questions not on the list to drill down about specifics. Listen for the question points. If there's a question in your mind, ask it. In addition to your questions, use the job description to ask questions about specific experience, skills, education, and abilities the person possesses that are the job requirements. And let me just go back for 1 second. Additional legal questions. If you don't know the questions you're not allowed to ask, send me an email and I'll tell you. You're not allowed to ask questions about marriage, children, any of those things. If you're tempted to say, do you have young children? Contain yourself and instead ask what you really want to know, which is, can you come every day to the practice on time and work your full shift every day consistently? That's what you want to know. You don't care if they have 9 children or 1 dog. If they can't come to the practice on time every day consistently, doesn't matter the reason. So ask clarifying questions and additional legal questions and ask what you really want to know. I don't post the job description and I don't post everything that is required beyond the basic must-haves. Why? Because I have had candidates come in and say, yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do it, just because I fed them all the answers ahead of time. I want them to come in with the basics.
Right.
And then I want to ask them the questions and watch their face and listen to how they answer on the rest of the things.
Smart.
After the bulk of the questions have been answered, now talk about the practice and the position. Because now you have enough information to gauge them. Are you going to want to move forward or not? That doesn't mean you don't talk about the practice and sell the practice and your dental expertise and the wonderful things about the rest of the team. You do. You do it to everybody. You treat everybody the same. But if you do that first, they will have the advantage of speaking to you and what you say instead of the other way around. They will become impressed at the end, and that's good. Ask the candidate if she or he has any questions for you. Most people who are good interviewees have questions planned ahead of time. So ask and be interested in what they're asking you. So listen to the information behind the answers. Did she actually answer the question? I put an exclamation point there because in a study done years ago, I read that among many interviewers, the top thing they look for is not experience, is not education. But does the person answer the question? That would seem to be pretty darn self-evident. But if they don't answer your questions, they're not going to answer your patient's questions well, nor are they going to answer your team. So ask a clear question and note, did the person actually answer the question? How does he or she organize their thoughts? There's an old question that's been around for many years. Tell me about yourself. The worst wrong answer is, what do you want to know? That puts the burden back on the interviewer.
Yeah.
If you say, tell me about yourself, you want somebody to pick the highlights, organize what they're telling you, have thought about that ahead of time, and tell you something you can use. You don't want to know if they have 9 cats. You don't want to know that they were born in Mississippi. You want to know what happens as they organize their thoughts and answer this question.
Huh.
Is he or she clear, easy to follow, rambling? These are things that you really want to pay attention to because they'll only get worse in the practice. Does he or she demonstrate self-confidence or arrogance? I had a wonderful woman interview with me a couple of years ago for a senior HR consultant position. And I'd test everybody, and she did the best on my tests. But she didn't have self-confidence. And for a consultant, that's a critical element. And I told her, and I said, it's important that you believe in yourself and you demonstrate self-confidence. But arrogance just tells people a person is insecure. So look for self-confidence. Take notes, but not on the resume. Take notes on a separate piece of paper. There have been a number of cases where people take notes on the resume. They can't, obviously nowadays, most of the time you can just reprint it, but don't take notes on the resume. Take it on the separate piece of paper you have with your questions. Capture the essence of what the person says so someone else can pick up what you wrote and understand it. If the candidate says something you shouldn't know, don't write it down. Sometimes people volunteer that they're married, they have children, etc. Just listen and nod your head, but don't write it down. You're not supposed to know that. And don't think because they brought it up that you can now ask questions about it. You can't. Oh, how many children do you have? Where do you live? None of that. This is about work only. Ideal notes are those that will substantiate your decision either way. So if you have a real talker on hand and you really don't want to hire a talker, write something that says that, but kindly. Let's talk about salary discussions. You come into this interview knowing the salary range of the position. You know what you can afford, you know what other people are making, or if you don't, do some market research. See what people are paying in your area. Ask your colleagues. You should have a range. You may not ask what the person was making in a previous job. Now, this is California law. This is not law in all 50 states. But the reason I'm putting it in here anyway is because there is the Equal Pay Act. There are laws that are on the books that may be passed in other states. And the reason for not asking what the person was making is because there is a tendency, if you have 2 candidates, to hire the cheaper person. In a lot of companies, that means the woman, because she's making less than a man. The effort is to not ask the previous salary, but put a value on the job and hire people for whom that value works, period. You may ask what salary they need going forward. That's perfectly fine. If you have that question as part of your written questions, then you can't be accused of asking the previous question about history. So again, the process will help you. If they choose not to answer and ask you what the position pays, you're required to have that information and tell them. So that would be good. You know already. And as I said, this is new California law as of January 18, and what happens in California usually spreads to at least some other states. The purpose is to end the disparity, as I said, between the salaries paid to each gender and ethnicity based on previous salaries rather than on the value of the position. So I think the intent is good.
Yeah.
If they volunteer their current or past salary, ask them what they need for this position. Do not write down the salary amount they volunteered unless you can prove you didn't ask for it. And that's if you have your question already written. That's the reason you have written interview questions. And this is the reason why you use your written interview questions consistently. Tell the candidate what the position pays and ask him or her if that salary works for them. Watch them carefully. The speed with which they reply and their body language will tell you what you need to know. If you have doubts, ask again. Usually they'll tell you if it works for them or not. What if they want to negotiate? You can certainly ask what amount is needed and note that the candidate requested that amount. Some candidates are very savvy and they will ask you outright if there is any room to negotiate on the salary, even if they would agree to the range that you gave. They subscribe to the theory that you won't get more if you don't ask for it. Let them know that you will consider it and that you'll get back to them. Thank the person for coming for the interview and let him or her know that you are interviewing others and will get back to him or her by the end of the week or whenever you expect to either go to the next step or make a decision. And that's kind of how the interview should go. What if you know right away? Go through the process, even if you think the person is not a fit. This exercise is not just about hiring someone. It's also about being able to show that you have a hiring process, and that process treats everyone the same and assesses people based on the same measurements. If you want to avoid a lawsuit, a discrimination claim, this is how you do it. Now, let's talk about checking references. Lots of people think previous employers will tell you nothing, so they don't ask. That is a mistake. Don't call the person's current employer unless given written permission, however, because you can put their job in jeopardy doing that. In fact, one of my favorite consultants that worked for me a number of years ago that maybe some Crown Counsel people will remember, I was driving, coming back from a client meeting. I got a phone call checking a reference on her, and she was looking for a job and hadn't yet told me. So that was one of those references given with kind of a lump in my throat. Call business references only and ask questions based on your interview questions. You'll get some very important information from people who have worked with this person before and are experts about them and their work. Listen for consistency between what the interviewee said and what the reference says on the same subject. There's no such thing as off-the-record comments, by the way. You may not write them down, that the comments that are made, but they're there nonetheless. So for example, I was recruiting for an accounting position for a construction company. We have clients of all different kinds also, including dentists. And they had a very unique type of software that this person needed to use. And I found the absolute perfect candidate. She presented well, she was poised, she really knew accounting, she knew this system back and forth. I was very impressed with her. And I noticed that in her list of references, she didn't have any reference from the company she just left that she worked for 11 years. I thought that was odd. So I called the president of the company and said, I would like a reference about this person. And he said, did she give you my name as a reference? Well, I knew it was going to be very interesting after that. And I said, no, she didn't. I just thought I would call anyway. And he said, well, she has been embezzling from us for the last 10 years. And when I found out about it, I terminated her. What if I had put that person in my client's office? Oh my gosh, my name would have been mud and worse. So you can call references that are not on the list.
Yeah, smart. Wow.
The same rules apply about asking only legal questions that apply to interviewing. They apply also to reference checking. If the person giving the reference tells you lots of personal information, don't write it down. You can hear it because you can't stop them, but don't write it down. listen for hesitation, wordsmithing, and lots of neutral answers. Here's another great experience that illustrates this. I was checking references on a staff accountant that one of my CPA clients wanted to hire. And I called a partner in the place where he recently worked. And I started asking questions of the partner. And I was getting all of these very, very, not positive, but neutral answers. And I could tell she was trying to help me and she was giving me answers, but she wasn't telling me anything. Finally, when I asked about punctuality and attendance, she said, in that regard, he follows directions perfectly. And I said, I heard that. And she said, good. What had she told me? She told me he doesn't follow directions in anything. And so when I told my client, don't hire this guy, he is not going to follow directions. They said, no, I think we're going to hire him anyway. We like him. So they hired him. And for about the next 3 years, they called me and said, you were right. You were right. We shouldn't have done it. You were right. So listen beyond the words. And if you do this a lot, you will absolutely become an expert. Look for patterns. One negative reference may not be controlling, but if nobody returns your call, there may be a reason. I always say my name and why I'm calling, that I want a reference about X person. People who are good, their references will go out of their way to call you back. Yeah. People that are not good, they will not call you back. So you're looking for a pattern here. If you're depending on a recruiter to check references, require that they give you the references in writing, including the name, title, phone number, and/or email address of the reference. I started as a recruiter. I worked for recruiting firms. I had my own recruiting firm for a while before I got into HR. And people pay sums to recruiters for half-baked work. So if you are using a recruiter, require them to check references and give them to you in writing. Don't take their word for it. And give you the phone number and the email address so you can do your own follow-up if you want to. There's a lot of, shall we say, well, I'll just say it. There's a lot of people that throw spaghetti at the window and hope it sticks. And that's what they call recruiting. So objective tools. Some of these are so great. Assessments. They're really great. I know that dentists have used DISC for years. DISC has kind of grown up in the industry. It's a lot more complex and gives you a lot more answers these days. But I also know a lot of people in dentistry say, oh, she's a high C, I'm a high D. She's, they label people by their letter. Yeah. There's some value to that, but only if you know what you need. So I use an assessment that was created by DISC people called work traits. And the reason I love it for dental offices is because it tells you not only the person's behavioral style and their core convictions or their motivation, but their compatibility with you and your team. It's very inexpensive, takes 15 minutes to do, and I love it. I use it when I hire my own people. Remember my comment about pace? It will tell you the pace as well. And so I always give work traits to my own staff that I hire. I'm looking for people skills, I'm looking for decision making, and I'm looking for pace. You have to know what you want to measure. And once you know the answer to that question, then you can choose an instrument that measures what you want to know. I want to know about pace. That's why I like this instrument. You may have other things you want to know. There's a lot of assessments out there, and they measure different things. For example, another thing that I did when I started my company is I would give my consultant candidates a sales assessment. You say sales, you're never going to find sales on an HR resume. That's exactly the point. But consulting is sales, if you think about it. If you can't sell yourself, if you can't sell your products and services, you don't eat. It's pretty simple. So I always gave a sales assessment to my consultants to see if they could sell. So it measures what you want to know. An assessment's a good addition to your process if you can show that the scores correlate directly to superior performance. If somebody is a high C and that works great in a certain position, then you know that you have proof that having this assessment as part of your hiring process gives you the results that you want. It also will help you decide who you want to hire and who maybe isn't the right fit. Above all, it must be job related, not just a personality profile. I have one more assessment story I can't resist telling. Years ago, before I was married, I went to a singles event on New Year's Eve, and I was standing there looking at all the men lined up against the wall holding a drink in their hand so nobody could ask them to dance. And I kind of stood there, and you know me, not exactly shy. I noticed this man. So I went over and talked to him, and he was very enjoyable. We had a nice conversation. And he said to me, "By the way, have you ever taken the Myers-Briggs? And it's a granddaddy of an assessment that's been used for many years." And I said, "Yes, I have." And he said, "Well, what are you?" And I said, "I am a, whatever I was, an ENTP, an extrovert, intuitive. T is for thinking, P is for percepting." Okay, and he said, "Oh, well, I'm looking for an introvert. Bye." And off he went. And he didn't even want it. We didn't have one dance. He didn't even want to talk to somebody who wasn't an introvert. So the man knew what he wanted. I give him credit for that. But I've laughed about that ever since. So you have to know what you want to measure. You have to look for the instrument that measures it. It has to be job related and not just a personality profile. If you are the kind of person that likes numbers and you want to use benchmarks, metrics, and key performance indicators, there's lots of books on those topics. Again, you have to know what you want to measure and you have to know what will get you there. They do give you a reliable and defensible measure of what truly works for your practice. So there is definitely value in them. And they are repeatable. So if you want to develop those, that's good. So we're already at the summary.
Nice.
That was quicker than usual. If you are clear about what makes a person successful in a particular position, you will be able to communicate that during the hiring process and throughout their employment with consistency. The biggest challenge in hiring is getting to know a person well enough to make a good decision. In that, the process is your friend. Hire slowly, hire well, and you'll save yourself all the other grief. Taking the time on the front end, I just said that, will save you grief and aggravation going forward. And that's a fact. Thank you, me,